Mark Hurd, thanks for being with us.
Sure, my pleasure.
Cool.
Great to be here.
Busy guy. I'm going to mention right at the top of the program here that this is your quiet period for Oracle, and so we're not.
Are there press people here?
A few.
Yeah, no, I'm not supposed to say anything.
Yeah, at all.
But I'm here. Because
I'll talk.
Yeah, you talk and I'll nod. And...
Ask me anything you want about Oracle. I'll be happy to answer your question. So we won't do Q&A just because we don't want to take the risk of the wrong question coming up. But I'll try to ask you good questions. And I want to start this time by doing a little connect the dots, A and B. You and I have now talked several times. And I think it was the first or second time we were talking, and I had a light bulb moment while we were having that conversation about the idea that Oracle was becoming so big in terms of its reach, in terms of the types of products and the importance of the database world and all that kind of, that it was becoming a platform company. And that it was itself really a platform. It has its own, 40,000 people come to Oracle World and so on. And in looking at that, from the backward side this week, I saw Larry Ellison.
Poor chief marketing officers out there. How many to Oracle Open World this year? 52,000.
52,000.
She'd really be upset.
It's a whole city that comes into San Francisco to learn about what they're doing.
A lot of humans.
Yeah. So there's a huge global ecosystem now that uses this platform. Obviously, the biggest in the world, in this world. And I saw Larry Ellison in a video from about a month ago talking about, we are the biggest platform, and I thought, there you go, that's it.
He probably wasn't in quiet period.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So congratulations on being a real platform. That's an amazing thing. And within that platform world, it's kind of, you guys get to write the rules in some sense, even though you're reaching out to customers all the time. I'd like you to start by looking at the world of data, because that's home plate for a database company, or what used to be a database company. And I'm one of those people who don't like the term big data very much, but for the entire period of time that Oracle's been in existence, every minute there's more data than the moment before. We're calling it massive data this week. But in this world of massive data, how does Oracle play differently than it played a year ago or 5 years ago?
Okay, well, that was a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I think in the context of data, our view is what you said. There's more data than there was yesterday. There'll be materially more. We use sort of the stats that there'll be twice as much data, at least as much data created in the next year than the history of the planet. And that you should think of that sort of doubling effect as you go on sort of every year. So these numbers get, simply huge. And call it whatever you want to, these overused terms like cloud, big data, social, all these things that are sort of the buzzwords of the day.
Mark, before you go any further, as a math guy, what happens? I mean, I believe you're right, but does that keep happening? Isn't there some kind of limit to how long that can go on?
See, I think we get limited in our heads a little bit, Mark, by physical humans, right? So you get these statistics that get you confused because you start with data created by, I've been always use the comment of, I think I did this last time we were here, I'm reaching for my computer. When I'm old, and when I started in the industry, this is more powerful than the mainframes I was selling back in the early 80s. And now there are 2 billion of these running around on the planet. There's about 6 billion sort of cell phones running around the planet. There's roughly 9 billion devices hooked to the internet. And so most of what we think about in data is sort of human created. You're going to see a new set of data created, which is what's created by machines. So we think of now, instead of 9 billion devices hooked to the internet, that actually go into 50 billion devices. And that not being created by more cell phones. That being really driven by the fact that you can now have, inanimate objects now with sensors, the ability to create a lot of data. Now, the issue we have, I think that all of us have, is a lot of this data that's going to be created is going to be worthless. And yet, there's now going to be technology available that you can actually go at this massive amount of data looking for pearls that, if you find them, can make a huge difference in the way that we live and the decisions we make. So we have a customer who now has sensors. I was telling you this the other day, that has sensors that they're putting on their oil wells. They make rigs. They put those rigs out, and those things have almost 10,000 sensors on them, sending back information by the second on what's going on with each moving part on the rig. Most time it just says everything's fine. And more than likely, that data is worthless unless you find that drill bit at the bottom of the Gulf before it breaks. And you can make a decision and take an action that changes things dramatically, saves you $20 billion, saves the Gulf, et cetera, et cetera. So you're going to see hundreds and hundreds of these applications that are going to create a lot of data, but driven, frankly, without a lot of human intervention.
Right. And I've seen the numbers like you're saying. Ericsson has a number of 20 to 40 billion. You're saying 50. Well, it doesn't matter who's right about this.
So it's big. It's big.
Now I think you just came from London recently, and I just heard the word data center. How many data centers are you guys involved in, and what kind of management issue is that? How does it?
Well, we don't really need that many data centers from a sheer scale perspective. So our cloud is, again, I want to make sure I say these words right. As we've announced in previous releases of information, our cloud business is well in excess of $1 billion in revenue. But we don't need that many data centers because our technology is very efficient in terms of the way it scales. So it's not so much that, it's the issue we have with the localization of data, the sovereignty of data, the security of the data. We have so many regulatory issues about data. We can't take employee data out of many countries. Many countries won't let employee data out of the country. So you have to have that data local to the country. So we have to have a data center, Mark, in most of the major countries that we compete.
Yeah, for legal reasons. Interesting. Now, when you get all this stuff sold, handled, built, put in place, analytics, you play a really large role and a growing role, I think, in the world of analytics, big data. Tell me about that.
Listen, I think the key with analytics is you're going to see more and more of these applications where you're going to be trying to align analytics to an operational system. An example I gave you the oil rig example. I'll give you another example. I did a demo at last year's Oracle Open World about the Chicago Police Department, big customer of ours. Here's an integration of social data, sort of real-time operational decisioning, and analytics. And these guys were very worried about the NATO summit in Chicago and protecting the visitors. They got to the NATO summit, and they're monitoring. They decided to monitor social data. And what they were doing was monitoring the protesters. And over Twitter, they would say, we're going to go meet us over here. The Chicago PD saw those tweets and realigned their workforce in real time and put people there before the protesters got there. And they integrated they integrated that social data with their analytics, with their operational force deployment system, and completely changed the answer. And you're going to see lots and lots of these analytic apps that are aligned with, call it whatever you want to, lots of data that I can now get through really quick. I can make better decisions, realign resources, whether those be assets, humans, whatever they may be, and create a different outcome.
I'd like to go back to your pearls for a minute. When we collect all this data, no matter where it comes from, we keep everything, don't we? We just keep everything. It seems as though, because what's a pearl tonight or what's not a pearl tonight might be a pearl tomorrow.
Right.
And the tools that we don't have tonight that you're going to build 2 weeks from now might be able to see something that we can't see now. So everything gets kept, isn't that true?
Listen, I think yes. Now, by the way, there's some regulatory issues now about keeping data. So you've got the government, who I want to make sure I'm clear. I'm a big fan of the government,
we love that.
The government. But there's a lot of regulation now about keeping phone records, keeping financial transactions that force you to keep data. Let me give you a quick set of economics on data. So most of our customers are growing their data right now roughly 40% per year. So even though we talk about the doubling of data, when they get through with all of their strategies around data, these are the biggest companies in the world. So this is not a guess. This is empirical of, call it the 100 biggest IT buyers on the planet. 40% data growth. Now, if you went to any of the 4 big banks in this country, they're all sitting on roughly 100 petabytes of storage. So, I mean, that's how much data any of the 4 big banks in the U.S. have. Some a little over 100 petabytes, some a little under. Now, let me just do the math for you. 40% on 100 petabytes, what's 40% of 100?
Well, let's see.
That's
Yeah.
very good. Very good. Very good. So I'll just help. It's 40.
40. Yeah,
40. Now, most of our customers, this is going to get tougher. I've got a tougher question coming up.
I got to run it up here.
Most of our customers spend about $8,000 per terabyte. See, now this is going to get tough. Can you do 40 times $8,000 a terabyte? Let me do it for you. It's $320 million. Yeah. So if you just collect the data and then you store that data, you'll write a check for $320 million if you're one of those 4 big companies that I just described. So that's a huge, huge check that you've got to go write. So as a result, these guys are going to be forced into a lot of decisioning about either not keeping data, getting rid of data, and what we think is the most important thing for them to do is to simply compress the data. So one of the things you'll see in us doing with our technology, you talked about data and the database, is try to take the data. We now have the capability to shrink data, compress it is what we would call it, by a factor of 10. So therefore, if you had 100 petabytes, we can actually shrink it to 10 petabytes, and then the math starts again.
Yeah.
But you have to keep compressing.
Yeah.
Because I think this thought, I did have one very senior guy tell me, here's our data strategy. We're just not going to have any more. and my point that was great, listen, I can't wait to meet you at your next, next company, right? But because we're not going to be able, that's not going to work. So there's going to be too much data. So the real trick's going to have to be, you've got regulatory pressures, you've got analytic pressures, you've got multiple listening posts that you now have to listen to that you've never had before. So this pressure is real, and we think the key thing to do is, if you're going to have to keep that data, how do we just make it physically smaller?
Yeah. We had someone talking yesterday from ARM about latency issues and data storage and how they're trying to make that better. And I wonder, do you, by being in the storage business, do you have, if I were one of those banks, would you say to me, well, we can have high latency here and low latency here, this will cost a little bit less, this kind of server for that, and that kind of server. So does latency itself provide you with a different set of economic equations for these big data customers?
I think whoever you're talking, I don't know all the context of what that discussion was, but I would think of it this way, that in the industry does not have a processing problem. I don't think the industry doesn't have a more performance on the chip. Most of the servers that are out in the industry today are 27, 28% utilized.
Is it cheaper to store data when it's offline or when it's on tape than on, that kind of thing?
Well, now the cost of disk has gotten to the point where there's not a huge advantage to tape anymore. Yeah. The latency is what you said, though. The latency is more in the spread of the data and the ability to get from where I am to the data and get the data back to me so I can then process it. There isn't a lot of latency in the press. So when somebody says we've got new processors out that are twice as fast, I don't think it's going to change the equation that much. What will change the equation a lot is the shrinking of the data, the latency of the process to get the data to the point that it gets processed.
Right. And with all the data centers that are being built right now and all the servers being sold by you and others, is there this refresh thing that happens not just on the per server basis, but on the whole data center? Are we going to have to go through a refresh cycle for all this storage on a massive scale?
I think the biggest thing, it's funny, it's an interesting point because the data is growing 40%, and yet when you look at the storage company's revenue, they're not growing. So customers are figuring out, so it's one thing when you start thinking about this the way I described it, and then you look at the actual revenue of the storage companies, and you say, where to go?
Is it virtualization?
Virtualization has occurred much more on the processor than it has on the data. Yeah. So the real key to the data are these different tricks, I guess that's the right word for it, different approaches to being able to get the data positioned in a cost-effective way, shrink it, dedupe it, find various ways that I can just deal with less of the data.
Yeah. Could I ask you for one more story about pearls? Is there some anecdote you know about where a company had a massive amount of information, didn't know what was in there, and changed their strategy or what they were doing because they found a pearl in there somewhere that they didn't know about?
Listen, I think there are pearls every day. I mean, I've got more anecdotes in my head than I have time to tell you. I mean, I think the biggest... Let me try to tell you one thing we didn't talk about that I think is one of the things you probably want to think about in terms of where the industry is going to head. Pearls are going to have to come and innovation is going to have to more come on the customer side than anywhere else. And let me try to give you facts. You know, I don't know how many people here are Americans, but of all of us that are Americans, 43% of us can retire in the next 8 to 9 years. We are going to, that's good news or bad news. On the consumer side, as all of us as consumers, we are going to be replaced by a different kind of buyer. By my kids, for example. And my kids expect really good service. You know, I'm old. I got trained to get crummy service. And so when I get good service, it's a differentiator. Now, when I retire, and these consumers come on, the pressure on companies are going to be huge. Because it used to be when I had a relationship with a supplier, I'd go in and get crummy service, and the relationship was between you and me. Now it's between you, me, and everybody I know. Everybody on Facebook, everybody I can tweet to, everybody I can communicate to, and I can communicate to them faster than you can resolve any problem I got. So if you got 1 million customers, and you got a 99% customer sat level, you got 10,000 upset customers. And then you got to deal with not just the 10,000 upset customers, but everybody those 10,000 upset customers know. So the ability to deal in real time with these nuggets about you or me or my brand or my product will put incredible pressure on companies trying to service. Remember, the applications behind these customers or behind these issues are frankly old. You know, you've got applications in this country that are average 18, 19 years old. I'll give you, for instance, right? Have you ever thought about how ridiculous this is? I travel around with a product, and I love phone companies like I love the government. But if I'm traveling, nobody ever tries to sell me anything. Has your phone company ever tried to sell you a different data plan?
Yes.
On the phone?
Yeah.
Great.
And then, you know, what's really weird is I got it on the iPad or something like that, and it says, oh, you can't do it from here. It says, you have to do it right now. And then I click yes, and it goes, oh, I'm sorry, you can't do it from here.
You know what I have to do? I have to go to the store.
Uh-huh.
I won't tell you who my provider is, but I have to go to the store.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything more ridiculous than going to the store.
Yeah, we've had the same experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to change. The person that can now change my data plan and my voice plan by country based on top of thing I'm doing and do it dynamically is going to get my business, and I'm going to dump who I got.
Well, as you know, these carriers that you love are the dinosaurs of the world in terms of being creative and inventive.
But Mark, what I'm trying to tell you is based on the approach that you take from apps and application capability and how you deal with the consumer, there are companies that will go out of business and companies that will get formed based on the ability to service that consumer. Yeah. Because you can't, if you go to a retailer today, I don't know if there's a retailer in this country that my wife is a customer of, and she's got a personal shopper. You know, this is bad for me.
Bad for you.
It's bad for me. And she's got a personal shopper, but they also give her a personal website.
Oh.
And if she goes on the website notifies the shopper that she's on the website. And then they can chat while she's on the website, which is really bad for me. Yeah. And so they can try. And
she's
now
spending a lot of money in that.
But they make it, the point being, Mark, they make it easy for her to spend a lot of money.
You bet.
And so they make it easy for her to connect. They make it easy for her to engage in a dialogue, and they make it easy for her to transact. Yeah. And she can do it globally.
You know, I think that's going to happen without the infrastructure you're describing really soon, where you walk in, facial recognition in the front door, they know it's Mark Hurd. Before you get 15 feet inside of Nordstrom's, your personal shopper is aware that you're in the store. The store itself is aware that you're in the store. Wherever you go, it knows where you are. And when you pick something up, the price is automatically somehow, you know, like...
Wouldn't you think these phone guys would know the same thing?
They're not going there. You know, they're phone guys. Well, you know, when Steve Jobs did the deal for Apple, he changed all that power structure from phone guys running the show to Apple running the show.
So back to let me try to connect these dots. If the retail companies can do this, the retailers, and I'd say they're ahead of the rest of the industries. Yeah. Think about the implication on the telecommunications industry, the implication on the banking industry. Have you ever tried to get one-stop service from a bank? And you know, they've got four very separate. The ATM is different from the branch, which is different from the call center, which is different from the web. And the ability to get omni-channel, unique or service, ubiquitous across those channels. These things will differentiate who wins versus who loses as you go forward. And the ability to now deal in a customer service manner as all of the warts of these companies with these social media applications, the warts from a customer service perspective will get exposed very quickly.
Well, I think you've described to us how Oracle depends upon social media for customer interaction. Is there more depth to or more varieties to how you guys use social media?
Well, remember for us, right, most of what we do is try to help big companies, mid-sized companies, deal with their issue. Mm-hmm. So most of what we think about is the way to embed social as a capability core to your applications.
Right.
So that in such a way that you can now integrate that dialogue with your core application sets.
And so they're usually internally through your products as well as external.
Right.
Yeah. Does this create a sea change for you in terms of how you work with the customer?
Most of our customers have made over the years a bunch of different decisions on how to approach their customer by channel. So a bunch of guys in a bank made a decision on ATMs. A bunch of guys in a bank made a decision about the call center. A bunch of guys in a bank made a decision about the branch. And as all of us know, it's no longer I'm going to go in the branch versus the web or the store versus the web. I'm going to do both. Mm-hmm. I'm going to look in the store. I may transact on the web. I may look on the web and then go into the store. And so what happens is these blur together, and then the ability to communicate via social as a mechanism so that you can monitor your brand, you can monitor your customer experience. Our objective is to bind those capabilities together, Mark.
Yeah. This is really a revolution for Oracle. It's pretty interesting, going from being the product in the box guys with applications, and then going software as a service, making that huge transition. I think everything you've got is available. Take your pick, kind of, by now.
You could strategically for us. You can buy. Oracle historically, you're right, Mark, has been a product company. Mm-hmm. So if you want to buy our products and buy 5 products from us and some others from somebody else and integrate them together, that's your decision. So we're still a product company to our core. You can buy our products a la carte. More of our work now, to your point, is to vertically integrate those solutions. You see that manifest itself in this thing called cloud, so SaaS applications and solutions along the lines of customer experience. Because I think long run, customers, they want more solutions and they want less products.
Yeah.
Give me something that solves a problem, and the more these things are integrated, and the more work you do, you being defined as Oracle, the more work you do on the front end, test this stuff, integrate this stuff, take the work off my back, the better.
They don't want the product, they want the solution.
And they want the work to shift. I mean, the problem in the IT industry, for the first time in our lives, consumers now spend more on IT than companies do. So think of it, the fact that now in the 1.8 trillion sort of is the size of the IT industry, about 850 billion spent by companies. And over 80% of what companies spend is on maintaining what they got. So think of less than 20% is on innovation. So now the consumer is innovating faster than the companies have money to create innovation. So frankly, that the industry has to do is I doubt CEOs are about to give their IT organization, say, listen, just spend whatever you need. Mm-hmm. They're going to say, listen, I don't have a ton of money. Cut your existing costs, realign your existing costs, and get more of that spend in innovation. And so I think that means you got to get the IT industry doing more work for the customer so that the customer can now spend more money on innovation.
Yeah. So you use the C words. Let's talk about the cloud for a minute. A lot of argument, a lot of discussion, a lot of positioning going on out there about cloud in terms of hybrid cloud, private cloud, public cloud, corporate cloud, your cloud, my cloud, their cloud. And you guys are right in the middle of that conversation. You must see a lot of decisions made every day by Fortune 500 CEOs. This is either a security question for me, I can't do it, or it's a core application, I don't want to let go of it, or I'm happy to take half of this and give it to you, and I'll keep the other half. And the translation of moving back and forth, the spiking in use. So how does Oracle approach customers who have all those problems?
Yeah, well, you said a lot of stuff. I think we've tried to strategically put ourselves in a position where we take everything you just talked about and try to take it off the table. Mm-hmm. That all of our intellectual property, all of our software is available through the Oracle Cloud. But if you like something in the Oracle Cloud, we'll do exactly in the Oracle Cloud for you behind your firewall in a private cloud. Mm-hmm. And if you don't like it in a private cloud, we'll do it on premise. Mm-hmm. And if you want to mix and match, we'll allow you to mix and match. So what we want to do is we'll do it OpEx or we'll do it CapEx. Mm-hmm. We'll do it really whatever way is optimal for you, all with an objective to focus the dialogue on the intellectual property and the solution, not on the delivery architecture. And I think this discussion on the delivery architecture is almost sort of silly, right? Because it's now, your point, your cloud, my cloud, what's the physical location of the computer? The better conversation is what's the best solution for you? And then if you can, take advantage of that IP in whatever way is optimal for you. And by the way, the good thing about the way we've done, which is I'd argue an expensive R&D strategy, is we've allowed you to change your mind. It's the exact same code base. Mm-hmm. Our code base in the Oracle Cloud is the same code base that's available in the private cloud, the same code base that's on premise. So you can actually do a hybrid. You could have a HR solution that's in a private cloud in the US and in a public cloud, the Oracle Cloud in Asia.
Can you dynamically change?
You can dynamically change.
Yeah, that's a big deal, I think.
It's a big deal.
Somebody's cloud, not Oracle's, just, somebody else. Netflix was using, and of course had huge outage, like a day and a half, something like that. And one of the reasons was because they were physically buying this physical data center's use, but not the other plan where they could buy all the data center's use. So they got messed up. And the owner of this cloud that didn't work so well made this excuse of, you only bought the one in DC or whatever it was. You didn't buy all 5 of them, you would have been fine. But from what you're talking about, it sounds as though you've already solved that problem. And basically, if I'm buying from you, we're covered. I would get a data plan.
Listen, this is all about, again, the ability to deliver service levels that are at the highest level in the industry. And the problem we have, again, is we're dealing with companies who are dealing with their customers. And listen, no downtime is good downtime. No downtime is tolerable downtime. All these decisions now come 7/24. The cloud has historically been, I don't want to get too technical with it, but a thing called multi-tenant, which is you can now leverage the same technology from multiple applications. All of our stuff, frankly, is single tenant. And we've done it that way for dedicated. So you have dedicated physical capacity. The only advantage of multi-tenancy has historically been economics. Our issue is now we can very economically, remember in our cloud is our hardware, we get a good price on database, we get a good price on middleware, it's our apps, so we really have no COGS, if you will, cost of goods sold. And so for us, we're very economic, and we can deliver, we think, a fantastic experience through that cloud that's secure, that's scalable, that's redundant.
So can you, without violating any of the things we can't violate, can you compare downtime for Oracle Cloud versus competitors?
Well, we don't even go into, our point is this works. We not only can give you through what we call our highest level of service. Our highest level of service is called Platinum service. And we've designed sort of a different mousetrap, Mark. Our view is that when you have a service request, what we would call an SR for service request, we actually now, because it's all our components, we actually have, think of it as like the FBI fingerprint repository. If we ever see an SR, we bounce it right back against the repository. We auto-patch that SR, and we commit that to you, that you will get 5-minute resolution on any SR that we see. And if for some reason we can't, we commit that we'll have a developer looking at that SR in less than 15 minutes. Not a customer support person, a developer. But these are the changes that occur in the industry as you begin to standardize these components and get to components that have great history that are your domain IP.
Yeah. I asked that question because it is a dirty little secret in the business that while everyone's shooting for perfection, a lot of these competitors of yours aren't even close to it, and they've had one after another a series of embarrassing downtime issues that seem to not go away. And my guess from what you're saying is that you guys are shooting for the top. You're shooting to be the premium provider of cloud services.
You don't want to compare a consumer. You know, there's different tolerance levels at the consumer level versus at the corporate level,
Right.
and so we're dealing with the biggest companies in the world with some of the most sophisticated, difficult applications in the world. But don't forget, at the core of the cloud, we're debating the physical location of the computer. Just because I moved the computer from here to there didn't really change much.
Right.
So the same issues you have here, I have there. So it really is about the IP, not the physical location of the computer.
Yeah. Okay. Security, for some CEOs, is the primary consideration in, well, increasingly in everything, but certainly in cloud selection. Do you guys, how do you deal with security issues? Everyone's got their own story about why their cloud is secure. Tell me yours.
Well, I mean, listen, I think security is a very broad-reaching issue. Comes into a lot of discussions. I mean, first, because of our database heritage, we know that when somebody's hacking an iPhone, they're typically not trying to get your iPhone. They're trying to get to your database. They're trying to get access to the data in your database. And so we typically think of security, from the inside out. Start by securing the database, then secure the apps, and then from there, you really have a secure environment. Now remember, most of the security breaches, over 90% of all the security breaches, do not come from outside your firewall. They come from inside your firewall. Most of the security issues are not some sovereign nation trying to launch an attack on your IT, but a disgruntled employee in a cubicle. And so, again, and they have access, they have passwords, they can get at information because they've been authorized, at least to get at some of the information. So our security issue is as much to deal with that, the segregation of duties.
What do you do about that?
Well, there's a whole set of processes, Mark, you can do in terms of segregating duties, segregating technologies. As you get into compartmentalized databases now, we have the ability to actually isolate different parts of the database and secure it. But remember, security is as much about how the company secures the data.
Policy-driven problem.
Exactly, as much as it is with the technology itself.
Right.
We, through different views, can authorize, if you have 1,000 employees, we can give you 1,000 different views of the data. And we can secure the other 990, or everybody from each other's piece of the data. But again, it's all about how you segregate the duties and the policies you put in place.
Yeah. And I don't know if you go this far in the security world, but are you running heuristics that would tell the CEO that I'm behaving strangely as about to be fired employee?
We would never say that about you, Mark. But I think at the end, the view for us is there is a growing practice. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. It's like, for example, many years ago when I was running a company called NCR, I took a security firm and I actually told them to go into the company, and you've got 60 days, and I want you to steal 10 documents. And I want you to come back at the end of 60 days.
The document you didn't have yourself?
No, documents we had in the company. You don't get the documents. I'm telling you, here are the 10 documents. See how many you get. Can you get our annual plan? Can you get our forecast? Can you get this? And you come back at the end of 60 days and say, yeah, I got all of them. And then they tell you every vulnerability on how they got it. It's the same way now in the electronic world. There are companies now, we as one, that will come in and actually do those tests for you. And the bad guys, it's just like physical security. I don't know what happens at your house, but when a crook comes to the house and goes to the door and tries to open the door, if the door is locked, they typically don't say, oh, well, and leave. They look for a window, they look for a door in the back, they look for other ways, and so the bad guy is always innovating, always trying to get one step ahead of us.
Right.
And so what we're trying to do is stay on the cutting edge of innovation of not just security, but innovation of methodologies by which you can find vulnerability. So it's a big practice for us.
I've done a lot of talking to security guys lately, as you guess you can tell, and there's a kind of a consensus that the advent of bring your own device is the biggest nightmare that ever happened to these guys. And that's your world. That's enterprise. So when everybody shows up with whatever phone it is, Android or something else, they're linking into a system that's running your applications.
Yes.
Do you have a way of protecting all this stuff that has to do with mobile devices?
What we would do, and what we do with our applications are iPad ready, iPhone ready, Android ready, and you can compartmentalize the application that sits on that mobile device. So you can now get a secure app, even though it's showing up, and so you basically think of it as just compartmentalized on the technology that has a very high level of security. Yes.
So within this insecure thing, you carve out a secure area.
Yes, this is fundamentally, I'm sure you know this, a very insecure device.
I do, yeah.
So if you want to get, I think I told you this a year ago, I had the CTO of Oracle, I gave my iPhone just for, because I was going to give a speech on security, hack it. I think it was a little more than 4 minutes.
Right.
And had all my email, and it's not good. It's not good.
Is it better now though? What you're
well, it's what I said now. So if you want to hack my iPhone now, you're going to get some of my stuff
off the phone.
You're going to get my stuff off the phone. You're not going to be able to get at our app.
Yeah.
So you're going to be dealing quickly with, as you get in towards the app, you're going to get blocked real fast.
And is there a difference whether it's an Android phone or an Apple phone or a Microsoft phone?
It's all OS agnostic.
Same solution. Okay. All right. Is that because it's compartmentalized?
That's right.
So you're actually going outside of the OS?
You will not deal with iOS. You'll not deal with Android. You'll be right into the security of the core app.
Okay, perfect. Well, this leads me quickly. I mean, you kind of know what's coming up, but of all the people in this room, there are no non-Java users, I think. So we have all had the experience of multiple updates, and we've read about Java being used as a vehicle to get into our systems by the bad guys. I know that you have a dedicated team of Java programmers on the case, because one of I know is that I get these updates all the time. So obviously you care about it, and you're on the case, but talk about that for a minute. Where is Java in terms of security, and where do you want it to go?
I think it's important to separate Java into a couple of categories, right? I mean, there's roughly 3 billion Java users on the planet. So there's, to your point, it's a very, very ubiquitous technology, point one. Point two, there's 9 million Java developers on the planet. I think, Judy, what do we have, 1 billion downloads of Java this year? A billion downloads. So 1 billion downloads of Java. So I don't have all the stats in my head. I have to look for help. But 1 billion downloads, 9 million developers, 3 billion devices. So this is a very ubiquitous technology. Most of all of that is Java Enterprise Edition. So that is not the subject of what you're
Java
bringing up.
Yeah,
that's right. So most of what's occurred here is Java on the desktop, or if you will, in the browser. And it is what you said, right? I mean, you've got, so it's not the core Java that all of us would know and use, but it is the stuff that's in the browser. And you're right, we've got bad guys, and we're chasing them.
It's a tough battle, isn't it?
It's a fight. Listen, in this security world, I'll bring it beyond Java, this isn't going away. So this is, whether what technology we're talking about, what platform we're talking about, the more popular the platform, the more attacks it's going to get. And the more work and more vigilant, all of us need to be, whether we're on the developer side or the user side, to protect the technology. And so, Mark, as I told you, we have a dedicated team on this. We think we're ahead. Doesn't mean we're going to not continue to patch, to continue to look for vulnerabilities, and continue to stay ahead of these guys.
Well, God bless you, and keep at it, because
we're
all
committed.
counting on it.
We're committed. There's nothing worse for us. Trust me. There's nothing worse for us than a breach.
Yeah.
And we take it so to the core. We take it seriously. There's nothing more important to us than securing this technology for our customers.
Yeah. Thank you. Hardware. So there was a time when that word wouldn't have come up, but hardware is pretty important now. And I think actually, from what I've seen, I won't ask you to make a prediction, but it's been doing pretty well.
Yeah,
a little bumpy, but pretty well. And so tell me about hardware. How do you see it in the future? Is it growing? Is it going to diminish as a
no, it'll be more. Again, I think the way we think of it is that it's sort of like what you've seen happen in the consumer world. I see a lot of you out here using devices where the software and the hardware have been pre-integrated for you. And we see the same thing happening in the enterprise. So for us, the thought of You know, if you're running a company, forget we're in the technology sector for a second. The value add of bringing humans to work to, you know, staple an operating system to a server is really very low. The thought that I'm now going to staple a database to an OS, very low. So all of these massive integration activities that go on in companies, we think have very low value add, and what companies want is more of that work done further back in the supply chain. And that's why for us, we don't think of it just as hardware. Mm-hmm. We think of it as high intellectual property that we can integrate the software and the hardware together and do things that other people can't do. So we can begin, as we start to build these engineered systems, we call them like Exadata, Exalogic, Exalytics. Exadata is Exa at the database, Exalogic is Exa in the middleware layer, Exalytics is Exa in the analytics layer. We can start to put the software co-resonant with the technology, so we can actually put the database on a chip. And you can start doing database calls directly out of the chip. And you can now integrate the compression.
And that speeds up your performance.
Speeds up. It gets to sort of mind-boggling numbers, right? So you add the compression I talked about earlier, and you have the factor of now you got database on a chip, you've got the storage that's now been compressed in the case, some cases 10x, and this is all because we can integrate the hardware and the software together as a system, as opposed to being a series of sort of isolated incidents that a bunch of people come to work to try to integrate. So for us, we've been very focused on getting our portfolio over the past 2 to 3 years aligned with this high intellectual property, high engineered systems sort of solution. So it's not really hardware per se, Mark. It is hardware in the way that a P&L would look at it. But in the end, it's really an engineered solution where we've done the work on our R&D as opposed to your IT budget and giving you, we hope, a huge competitive advantage in performance. And frankly, when we do it in performance, we also give it to you in cost and support.
In the time that you and I have been talking to each other over the years, and in your own career, you've been through these slice it, dice it, slice it, dice it. The industry seems to go through these changes where it's flat and then it's verticalized, and then it's this way, and then it's, and right now verticalization is the obvious key answer. Do you think that's going to change again? Will we go again into a time in 10 years where we have?
Well, I mean, it's like the same thing. You know, I don't know any of you who run big organizations, but you always have the debate: should we centralize something or should we decentralize something? And you get into an argument about it because neither one's perfect. You centralize something and you get a lot of benefits. When you do that, you typically get more command and control. You get less improvisation in front of the customer where you go, and you say, okay, for a while, I want those benefits of centralization. At some point in time, I might decentralize. What's happened in IT has been that there's been a view that I'm going to get procurement leverage by spreading things out. I'm going to get 2 PC vendors, 2 server vendors, 2 OS vendors, and I'm going to beat their brains out to get the lowest price I can. But as you disaggregate this stack, I create more complexity on the back end. I now have to bring more humans to work to cobble these disparate pieces together. Over a period of time, that becomes uneconomic. So now if I've got my piece parts procured right, and now I can go with a TCO that's now verticalized and take that other cost out, yeah, there's going to be a wave here. Mm-hmm. And by the way, you know, your point on the cloud, that's the ultimate verticalization, right? I always get these goofy conversations where a customer will say, what chip is in that box? I've got a religion about that chip. I want to know the nanometer size of that chip. But then if I say, well, it's cloud. Oh, it's cloud. Oh, I don't care. I don't care then. And so it's really so contradictory that it makes no sense. But in the context of this discussion, it sort of does. Yeah. I'm willing to let go of some level of control to get a simpler process. Someone else is managing it, somebody else is doing the work, and I'm willing to give up that control to be able to get that level of manageability.
When you look at big customers 10 years from now, do you think that these companies are really just going to transfer everything to your cloud or somebody's cloud? Are we really going to take the whole IT operation and put it up there in the cloud as you become better and better at managing it and securing it and all that kind of stuff? Is the whole thing transferred?
Well, listen, we'll let.
Does it change the nature of being? We'll
let time unfold. I think what's going to happen, at least for the next several years, will be the biggest issue in IT is what we talked about earlier. I've got to simplify this stuff. I'm spending a ton of money.
A financial pressure.
Financial pressure that I'm spending a lot of money. The consumer's out innovating the company. Most of my money is going into maintaining my existing structure. I got to get the cost out of that, and I got to get it into this customer experience sort of innovation. And I think that's going to drive a lot of decisioning, whether it shows itself up in public cloud, private cloud. What I don't think will happen, I'll say this, I don't think you're going to see a big company that's got hundreds and hundreds of processes give multiple hundreds of cloud vendors separate deals so they all come in with silo process that you now can't horizontally manage across the company. That won't happen. How much will go to the cloud, how much will be private cloud? I think that's going to be, Mark, a very blurry line that probably isn't worth worrying about.
Okay, but when you look at the at this world, let's say there are 5 players. There are 2 million companies. There are, Fortune 500, 500 of those. If some decent fraction, 50% of all the IT functions that are today housed inside shift over 5 years or 10 years into the cloud, the world changes completely, right? Because now what we really have are these 5 guys. If IT is a benefit, now we have 5 guys running the world instead of the IT departments of 500 companies. Is that the future?
I think you will see people do a lot of things in the name of simplification. And I think if that means that you can get to a world with a few simple players, I mean, listen, our industry will go through changes like many other industries have. I mean, the reason I get a kick out of this cloud thing is it's sort of like the IP. It's like you go to the car industry. I always wonder who was more innovative, Henry Ford or the guy who invented Avis. And my sense is it's Henry Ford. I mean, he invented the car. The guy who invented the rent-a-car, interesting idea, but it didn't really change the core IP. So I think you're going to see this evolution to where the innovation of how I deliver it to you, how you pay for it, it's still going to all be about the IP. It's going to be about the ability to get the best IP and the best solutions for customers, not about how it's served up to me.
But I'm thinking that you're seeing those pressures driving it into the cloud.
If you just go line up the revenue growth and of the industry, it's going to force more consolidation, not less. And it's going to force more of this integration for the other economic pressures I described. And my guess is you're right, that you're going to see a handful of very significant players.
Well, as one of my favorite leaders and as one of those 5 guys, congratulations.
Thanks, Mark.
And thank you for your
time. Thank you all. Bye.